Thank you for joining us on News 6 and clickorlando.com. I'm News 6 anchor Lisa Bell, and we are here to talk about a mystery monkey that has made an appearance in Volusia County. You may have seen the headlines on clickorlando.com or on News 6. We told you earlier this week about a tour operator along the St. Johns River who captured video of the monkey that was just swaying around in the trees. Here's some of that video now. Now, this happened near Orange City, and we are now learning there may be even more monkey sightings in the area. So joining us to talk more about these monkeys and what they are doing in Central Florida is Assistant Professor Dr. Kim Valenta, who teaches primatology classes at the University of Florida. Dr. Valenta, thank you for joining us.
Of course, happy to be here.
Well, first tell me, how did you get involved in the study of primates?
That is a very long story that we probably don't have time for, but yeah, just a general background in tropical biology, got really, really interested in primates basically and their role in tropical forests.
So this boat operator that we spoke with in Volusia County said in all of his years of touring along the St. Johns River, he has never seen a monkey. How common are monkeys in Florida, specifically Central Florida?
So there is that I know of at least one resident population of both rhesus macaques, which I'm pretty sure this guy is one of that. And there's also a permanent resident population of vervet monkeys that are free roaming in Silver Springs near Ocala. And I've heard stories of potentially other small populations of basically free roaming escaped monkeys elsewhere in Florida. Florida is a very subtropical environment. The rural parts of Florida, of course, have pretty good food availability for wildlife. And so once monkeys are released here, they tend to do okay.
Okay, so you said escaped and released. These are not native to the state of Florida.
Nope. No, there are no extant species or no still living species of primates, aside from humans, of course, that are still alive and native to Florida. The closest native species that we have would be in southern Mexico, which is the extreme northern range of howler monkeys. These guys, these rhesus macaques, are actually, they belong in mainland Africa.
Okay, so do we know when they were first released or escaped here in Florida?
There are a lot of conflicting stories, actually. Since moving myself to Florida a few years ago, I've been trying to figure out exactly how these monkeys got to Silver Springs. And there's a lot of lore around it. So the most popular and I think widespread story is that about 100 years ago, a tour operator wanted to offer sort of jungle safari-like tours to visitors in Florida and decided it would be a good idea to release some monkeys for those tourists to see in what is now Silver Spring State Park. And that population basically just thrived and expanded. Also, rhesus macaques, this particular species that we have this resident population of in Silver Springs, and which I think this guy is a member of that species, they are actually very, very commonly used as laboratory monkeys, so in medical testing. And so there are actually a lot more than you might think, captive rhesus macaques in Florida being used to test things like medicines, in neurological labs, etc. And so it's very possible that they can escape. Florida also, of course, has a large number of these very small sort of zoos and conservation centers with lots of species that aren't originally from here. And they can, of course, escape from there too. I've also heard that some of the monkey populations that have been established in Florida in the past have escaped from circuses, zoos, or basically been dumped by their owners after they were no longer wanted as pets.
Any idea specific numbers, how many of these are living in the wild?
I am not totally sure. I know that the population at Silver Springs State Park fluctuates quite a bit. If they are the descendants of the population that was put there specifically for tourist viewing, they would have all been descended of only 6 individuals. But of course, there's now at least one thriving social group living in Silver Springs. My understanding is that there are occasional attempts to control the population by the state. and possibly the state park system through culling. And that there can be public backlash against that culling because a lot of people don't want to see any harm come to these monkeys. So I think it's sort of one of those things that's a constant back and forth, and the population number is sort of constantly in flux for that reason.
So, obviously, when we think about kind of invasive species here in Florida, one of the things that comes to mind for a lot of people are pythons in the Everglades, which are so harmful. And we've seen they've just decimated, native populations of all types of animals. Are these monkeys really a threat to the ecosystem here in Florida?
That's a really good question. So, to be considered an invasive species, you've got to check at least one of three possible boxes. To be an invasive species, you have to either be doing some kind of ecological harm, some kind of harm to human agriculture, or basically be a pest species, or be doing some harm to human health. I think it's that last one that fundamentally qualifies the rhesus macaques as an invasive species. I don't want to alarm anyone, but they are carriers of a virus that they commonly carry that doesn't do very much harm to them over the course of their lives, but can be very, very dangerous if we contract. So, for that reason, I think this species is considered to be invasive. In terms of their role with respect to interrupting ecological systems, I'm sure that that's happening. I'm just not entirely sure if anyone's looked at specifically how they might be doing that here in Florida.
And when you talk about the virus that they can carry that could potentially harm humans, I'm assuming you're talking about hepatitis B. That's what we've heard a lot when it comes to these monkeys.
It's actually herpes B
Oh,
virus.
herpes. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
another
So
AIDS
what
virus.
is that, and how would you contract that from a monkey?
Good question. So the herpes B virus is actually really, really closely related to the herpes virus that humans commonly get that causes cold sores. Just like us, when we get the virus that causes a cold sore, it usually doesn't knock us out. It doesn't really, certainly doesn't kill us for the most part. It's just one of those viruses that you sort of live with, and it can be a little uncomfortable, but doesn't really ultimately change your lifespan or your quality of life. Herpes B virus, which is the flavor of herpes that these macaques can carry, is a closely related virus, but it's different enough that it can be extremely dangerous to humans. However, just like herpes in humans doesn't really cause us too much trouble, the herpes B virus, when macaques contract it, causes them really no trouble at all. It doesn't make them sick. They don't have clinical signs of illness. It's something that they contract and then just sort of live with. The risk is because humans did not co-evolve with the macaque version of the virus, and because we are so closely related to them, meaning that we can contract and sort of go through the metabolic initial processes of that virus establishing in us, means that when we get the herpes virus, it can be extremely dangerous to us. Luckily, however, the only way that we can contract the herpes virus from a rhesus macaque is basically by swapping fluids, similar to how you might contract the human herpes virus. So, avoid obviously kissing the monkey, avoid being bit by the monkey, is probably the most likely way that someone might be able to contract this virus. So, definitely avoiding things like feeding the monkeys, trying to get close to them, trying to reach out to them. A bite from a rhesus macaque can transfer the virus by basically transferring the virus in the saliva of the monkey into the blood of the human.
Are these monkeys known to be aggressive? I mean, if you see one, do you need to run away from it? Will it attack you?
No, as you can see in these videos, this guy was being looked at, presumably by the person holding the camera, and he's clearly trying to just go about his day, right? It's a good thing he's not approaching the person taking the video. I have heard that at Silver Springs and some other places, there can be problems with visitors and tourists feeding monkeys, and that can cause monkeys or really any other species of wildlife to certainly associate people with food and then approach people for food, just like it would with any other species of wildlife. And that can potentially be dangerous. So, Yeah, basically do yourself a favor and do your community a favor and do the monkeys a favor at the end of the day by, not attempting to get near them, to not attempting to try to habituate them to human presence, and certainly not trying to lure them in with things like food.
So, do these monkeys, do you know, have any predators here in the state?
That's a That's a really good question. I assume that they could be predated and are regularly predated by the predators that we have, both native and invasive. I imagine that an alligator could very easily have a monkey for a snack, as well. Maybe some of the larger invasive snakes could be dangerous to them, as well as some of the native venomous snakes would probably not be very good for them either. So I'm sure that where they are, they've sort of become part of the predator prey system in the environments where they've established populations.
And what do these monkeys eat?
They are generalists. So the reason that they're able to survive well away from their natal range, right, of mainland Africa, is that rhesus macaques, as well as vervet monkeys, which is that other population, they're kind of like the raccoons of mainland Africa, if you will. So they're very, very adept at surviving in really highly anthropogenically disturbed environments. In other words, environments that have been shaped by humans, and they're very, very adept at surviving on a really omnivorous diet. So they can eat fruit, they can eat animal protein, they can eat some leaves, shoots, mushrooms, almost anything that you can think of that a human might be able to eat. These macaques and also the vervets can do the same. So they are dietary generalists, they're habitat generalists, and it's why they're able to survive in a place like this, right? Imagine if you released, for example, a bamboo lemur, which is a type of primate that can only eat a very few number of species that are only found on the island of Madagascar. If you released a bamboo lemur in north central Florida, you would not have a thriving bamboo lemur population. They couldn't find their food. If you release a dietary or habitat generalist species like macaques and vervets, they'll do fine because they can just about eat anything.
Talk to me about the climate that they can live in. Lately, we've had some pretty cold days here in Central Florida. Can they survive really cold temperatures?
Yeah, they absolutely can. So more to that habitat generalization. You can find them in savannas. You can find them on high plateaus. You can find them in closed, dense, moist jungle. They really live in a huge variety of different habitat types across mainland Africa.
So, if someone spots one of these monkeys, you mentioned don't approach them, but should they be calling FWC or some type of authority to report this?
Yeah, I think it'd be certainly worth it to report to the Florida Wildlife Services or perhaps their municipal wildlife services just to kind of give them a heads up. Um, of course, it would be very interesting if we started to see, as you've just mentioned, more and more monkeys coming down the St. Johns River. And it's not necessarily unexpected. So the way that it works with these monkeys and really all other group living species is that upon reaching effectively puberty in any group living species, one of the sexes, either all of the males or all of the females, will disperse away from their original group. So basically, upon hitting puberty or sexual maturity, one sex, for the rhesus macaques, it's the males, will leave, they'll strike out on their own, and their goal is to find another group to join with unrelated females that might be potential mates. My best guess of what's happening with this guy is that he's probably a dispersing male from those groups around Ocala, i.e., he's become an adult and he's now on the hunt searching for another group of rhesus macaques to join. Sounds though like he probably isn't going to find one down there if this is one of the first and only sightings.
Well, and I know from previous reporting we've done, I mean, the estimates for these monkeys are anywhere from, a couple dozen to even a couple hundred of these living potentially in Central Florida. When they breed, how many offspring can they create, and how long before they can really kind of build up a big population?
So they are very, very closely related to us. They're old world monkeys. So we're in actually the same subfamily as these guys. And just like humans, there's no breeding seasonality, meaning there isn't like one particular part of the year when all the babies are born or when everybody's in breeding season. Just like humans, all of the old world monkeys breed sort of regularly throughout the course of the year. There's no seasonality to it. And they tend to stay with their native groups before dispersing or before mating approximately 4 to 6 years. Twins are possible, but they're pretty rare. They're rare in monkeys, even rarer in monkeys than they are in humans. So, for the most part, these monkeys, around reaching anywhere between 4 and 7 years of age, will start to become reproductively active and will start to produce single offspring.
And what's their gestation period?
I'm not totally sure for this species. I would have to look it up, but gestation period and the length of infant dependence is usually pretty well correlated to the size of the monkey. Very generally, I would guess based on their body size that gestation would be anywhere between 4 to 6 months for this
Okay.
species. But again, I'd have to look it up. And then, as with all species of higher primates, old world monkeys and apes included, there's quite a long period of total infant dependence. So basically, it could be a year or two where the mother is constantly with her infant before the infant really starts to kind of explore out there on their own. And then again, reaching reproductive age anywhere between 4 and 6 years.
So fascinating. And they are so much kind of like humans. I mean, I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I feel like I'm constantly with my children to this day. So, uh, and they're just a couple of years. So it seems like every year or so, they could maybe have another offspring and send them
Exactly.
off into the forest here in Central Florida. Thank you.
Only the males.
Only the males. Well, thank
Yes,
you so much for joining us and giving us a little bit of insight into these monkeys. And as I mentioned
absolutely.
earlier, this may just be the beginning of several monkey sightings here in Central Florida. So we'll see what happens.
Do let
Dr.
me know.
Thank you, Dr. Kim Valenta. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye.